The dusty playground lay silent except for the echo of laughter and the sound of a ball bouncing on cracked stone. Alien children with bright skin and long limbs ran across the field, chasing the ball with energy that seemed endless. Their voices filled the air with joy as they shouted to each other, each kick louder than the last. The sun dipped behind the jagged cliffs, painting the sky orange, but the game did not stop. On the edge of the playground sat a small alien girl. Her eyes followed the ball with longing, but she did not move from her spot. One of her legs was twisted and weak, bound in an old brace that had long lost its strength. Every time the children shouted, "Come on, join us," she only shook her head. She whispered quietly, almost to herself, "Sorry, I can't play ball." Her voice was soft, but not so soft that it went unheard. A human mechanic working nearby lifted his head at those words. His workshop was just across the dirt road, where he repaired broken machines and patched up small ships that came through the colony. He was tightening a bolt on a heavy engine, his hands blackened with grease, but his ears caught the sadness in her tone. The mechanic turned his eyes toward the girl. He noticed the way she hugged her knees, the way her fingers pressed into the ground as if holding herself down so she would not try to stand. Her gaze never left the ball, not even once, even when the other children laughed and celebrated their goals. There was pain in her eyes, but deeper than pain, there was hunger. Hunger to belong. Hunger to play. Hunger to be free. He sighed, wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, and returned to his tools. But the words still echoed in his mind. "Sorry, I can't play ball." The girl lowered her head. She had tried before. Many times. Each attempt ended the same. She would stumble, fall, scrape her arms, and the laughter around her would turn cruel. She had grown used to being the outsider, the one who could only watch. Her brace, given by her people's doctors, was too old, too weak. It held her upright for a few minutes, then failed her again. As the children shouted louder, she whispered again, almost like a confession to the air, "I wish I could play. Just once." The mechanic's wrench slipped in his hand. He closed his eyes for a moment, and memories flooded back. He remembered being a boy himself, standing in a crowd where others told him he was too small, too weak, never strong enough to join. He remembered the sting of rejection, the fire of shame. But he also remembered the one man who had believed in him, an older worker who had handed him his first set of tools and told him, "If they don't let you play their game, make your own." The mechanic tightened the last bolt, then stood slowly. His gaze shifted back to the girl. He saw more than weakness in her. He saw determination. Even in her silence, her eyes screamed with a wish to rise. The ball bounced close to her as one of the children missed a kick. For a single heartbeat, she reached for it. Her hand brushed against its surface. But the moment her leg moved, pain shot through her brace, and she stopped. Her fingers trembled as she pushed the ball back toward the others. The laughter grew again, but now it had a sharp edge, the kind of laughter that cut deeper than words. The mechanic felt something tighten in his chest. He looked down at his hands, scarred from years of fixing machines that were always close to breaking. He had fixed engines that were declared useless, ships others had given up on, tools that should have been thrown away. And now, sitting before him, was someone who had been treated like a broken thing. He could not look away. The girl did not know it, but something inside him had shifted. The mechanic had begun to form a plan, though he kept it buried deep, hidden under the mask of silence. He returned to his workshop, moving slowly, but his mind was no longer on engines or bolts. His thoughts circled around the girl, her leg, her words. The girl stayed on the ground until the game ended. When the children finally left, chasing the fading light home, she remained, alone. She reached down and touched her brace, whispering to it as if it were alive, "Why can't you help me?" Her eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them away. She had cried enough nights alone, and she would not let anyone see. From the corner of the workshop, the mechanic watched quietly. He pretended to be working, but his eyes followed her every move. He saw the pain she hid and the strength she did not know she had. When she finally stood and limped away, her shadow stretched across the playground. The mechanic clenched his jaw. His hands curled into fists, but not from anger at her. It was anger at the world that had left her behind. As the evening wind blew across the colony, he whispered words no one else could hear. "You will play ball, even if I have to build the legs for you." The girl walked away unaware, but destiny had already begun to change. The mechanic had a plan, and nothing, not broken tools, not empty laughter, not even the universe itself, would stop him from making it real. The night fell quiet over the colony. The marketplace lights dimmed, and only the faint hum of distant ships filled the air. Inside his small workshop, the human mechanic sat hunched over a table cluttered with broken tools and scraps of metal. A dim lamp flickered above his head, casting shadows across the walls. His hands rested on a small piece of alien alloy he had saved earlier that day. He wasn't looking at it, he was lost in thought. The words of the little alien girl repeated in his mind like a broken record. "Sorry, I can't play ball." He leaned back slowly, staring at the ceiling as if the stars could give him answers. But the truth was, he already knew what had to be done. He knew because once, long ago, he had been in her place. Years earlier, before he ever came to this distant colony, he had lived on a broken mining world. It was a place where humans were treated as second-class workers, where children were expected to labor before they could even dream of play. He had been small, thin, and always behind the others. Whenever there was a game, whenever there was a team, the choice was always the same: he was left out. He remembered the sting in his chest, the sharp ache in his heart when others said, "You're too weak. You'll slow us down." He would stand on the edge of the field, fists clenched, pretending he didn't care. But inside, every word carved deeper wounds. One night, after being pushed aside again, he had wandered into an abandoned machine shed. It smelled of oil and rust, and the walls groaned with age. There he met an old worker, a human with scars on his face and eyes full of fire. The old man had looked at him and said, "You want to join their game? Stop waiting for permission. Build something better for yourself." The boy had been confused at first, but the old worker had placed a tool in his hand. A wrench, heavy, rough, and real. That moment had changed everything. From then on, he stopped waiting to be chosen. He built, he repaired. He created machines that others thought were impossible. And step by step, with grease on his hands and stubbornness in his heart, he found strength no one could take away. Now, years later, sitting in his own workshop, he remembered that turning point. He thought of the little alien girl, her eyes full of the same hunger he once carried. She didn't need pity. She needed a chance. And he would give it to her. He pulled a drawer open and took out a small notebook, its cover burned and edges worn. Inside were sketches and blueprints he had drawn long ago, designs for exobraces, support suits, and half-finished dreams. He had abandoned them years before, believing no one would ever need them. But now, those forgotten pages seemed alive again. As he flipped through the sketches, his mind raced. He could see the device clearly, a support brace powered by small energy cells, reinforced with alien alloy, light enough for a child to move, but strong enough to hold her steady. It wouldn't just help her stand, it could let her run. Maybe even play, but reality struck hard. The materials he needed weren't easy to find. Most of the scraps in his shop were old and corroded. The rare energy crystals needed for stability were locked away in government storage or sold at high prices in the black market. If he was going to build this, he would have to risk more than just sleepless nights. He looked at his hands. The scars reminded him of every risk he had taken before. His lips curved into a faint smile. "One more won't kill me," he whispered. From outside, faint footsteps passed by the workshop. He froze, listening. It was the girl. She had lingered near his shop, probably on her way home. She paused, her shadow visible through the thin curtain. For a second, he thought she might come inside. But then her shadow moved on, fading into the night. The mechanic's chest tightened. She had no idea he was thinking of her. She had no idea he was planning something for her sake. To her, he was just the man who fixed machines. But soon, she would see him differently. He pushed aside his doubts and began gathering scraps from the corners of his shop. Old gears, pieces of armor plating, wires stripped from dead engines. He laid them on the table, one by one, his mind already shaping them into something new. His movements were sharp, decisive, as if his body had remembered a rhythm from long ago. Midnight passed, but he did not stop. Sparks flew from his tools as he tested circuits. Metal rang under his hammer as he bent pieces into shape. His eyes burned with fatigue, but his spirit felt alive in a way it hadn't for years. At last he paused and stared at the half-formed brace lying before him. It was crude, far from complete, but it was the beginning of something powerful. He ran his hand across its surface and whispered, "She will stand. She will run. And when she does, no one will laugh again." The workshop light flickered. Shadows danced across the walls, and the mechanic's plan grew bolder. He would not only fix what was broken, he would rewrite the girl's story. But deep inside, he knew this was only the start. The true challenge was yet to come. Asterisk, the sun had barely risen when the mechanic wiped the sweat from his forehead. He had worked through the entire night. His eyes burned red, his hands ached, but on the table in front of him rested something new. It wasn't perfect, not even close, but it was the first step of his plan. A rough brace lay across the workbench. Its surface was patched with different alloys, its wires tangled but connected, and a small energy cell pulsed faintly at its core. It looked fragile, almost as if one touch might break it. Yet to the mechanic, it was alive. It was hope made of metal. He stared at it for a long moment, wondering if it would work. Machines were easier than people. Machines obeyed logic. But this device wasn't just about gears and wires, it was about giving a little girl something she had been denied her whole life. He wrapped the brace in a cloth and stepped out of his workshop. The air outside was fresh, carrying the sound of children's voices. Once again, the game had already begun. Balls flew through the air, laughter echoed, and on the edge of the field, the alien girl sat, hugging her knees. Her eyes flicked toward him when she noticed his shadow. She tilted her head, confused, as the mechanic walked closer. He didn't smile, but his voice was steady. "Come," he said simply. She blinked. "Why? I have something for you." Suspicion filled her gaze. She had learned not to expect kindness from strangers. Still, there was something in his tone that made her stand. Limping, she followed him back to the workshop. Inside, the girl's eyes widened. She had never been here before. Tools covered every surface, walls stacked with old ship parts, wires dangling like vines. In the center, on the table, lay the strange brace. "What is it?" she asked softly. The mechanic unwrapped it carefully, his calloused hands moving with precision. "It's for you." Her heart skipped. "For me? But why?" He paused, meeting her eyes. "Because you deserve to play." She stared at the device, fear mixing with hope. The brace looked heavy, full of sharp edges and glowing sparks. "Will it hurt?" "Maybe a little," he admitted. "But I'll be here." Slowly he guided her to a chair. His hands worked gently, securing the brace around her damaged leg. The metal clicked into place, wires tightened, and the small energy cell began to hum. For a moment, the girl flinched at the vibration. The mechanic crouched beside her, his voice calm. "Stand," he said. Her heart pounded as she placed her feet on the ground. Her good leg trembled, but the brace held firm around the weak one. She gripped the side of the chair, then lifted herself carefully. For the first time in years, she stood taller than a few seconds. Her eyes widened. I'm standing, the mechanic nodded, though his jaw tightened with tension. Now take a step. Her body shook as she shifted her weight. One step forward, her brace clicked, the metal locked, and she moved. For a brief second, joy exploded in her chest. She took another step. Then another. Her laughter filled the workshop, light and unrestrained. The mechanic almost smiled, but then sparks. The brace jolted suddenly. Energy sputtered from the cell. The girl gasped as her leg gave way beneath her. She collapsed to the floor, crying out as pain shot up her side. The mechanic rushed forward, pulling the device off her before it could burn her skin. His hands moved fast, checking her for wounds. The girl, wide-eyed, tried not to cry, but tears spilled anyway. "It doesn't work," she whispered. The mechanic stayed silent for a long moment. Then he said firmly, "Not yet." Her lips trembled. "Everyone will laugh again. They'll say I'm broken." He met her gaze, his eyes sharp. "Let them laugh. They don't matter. What matters is that you stood. You took steps. That means we are close." The girl wiped her tears, staring at him in disbelief. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust that this wasn't just another failure. But she had been disappointed too many times. She lowered her head. The mechanic lifted the brace from the floor. It was damaged, wires fried, and sparks still flickered faintly. He turned it over in his hands, studying the flaws, already calculating improvements. His voice dropped, more to himself than to her. "I'll fix it. I always fix what's broken." The girl looked at him quietly. She had no words, but something in her chest stirred. For the first time, someone had not given up after one failure. The children's laughter echoed faintly from outside. She clenched her fists. She wasn't ready to face them again, not yet. But maybe. Someday. The mechanic stood and set the brace back on the table. His eyes were already locked on the tools he would need, the parts he must find. He did not rest, did not hesitate. The first attempt had failed, but failure was only fuel, and deep inside, the girl felt it too. For the first time in her life, failure did not feel like the end. The morning sky glowed pale blue as the colony slowly woke. Vendors shouted in the marketplace, ships rumbled above, and children once again gathered at the old playground with their ball. Their voices carried across the dusty air, bright with laughter. But today, something different was about to happen. Inside his workshop, the mechanic tightened the last screw on the improved brace. His eyes were tired, but his hands steady. He had worked for days without rest, adjusting the circuits, replacing the damaged core, and reinforcing the metal joints. The first attempt had ended in sparks and pain, but he had learned from every mistake. This version was stronger, smoother, more reliable. At least he hoped so. The door creaked, and the little alien girl stepped inside. She still walked with a limp, but her eyes held something new, hesitation mixed with hope. She looked at the mechanic, then at the device lying on the table. "Will it work this time?" she asked. The mechanic wiped the grease from his hands. "There is only one way to know. But this time, you won't test it here. You'll test it where it matters." Her eyes widened. "On the field?" He nodded. Her heart pounded. The thought of walking running in front of all those children made her stomach twist. She remembered their laughter, their cruel stares. But when she looked at the mechanic, his steady gaze gave her courage. He believed. That was enough for her to try. Minutes later, they walked toward the playground. The children were already in the middle of their game. When they noticed the girl limping across the dirt with the human mechanic by her side, the laughter grew louder. "She's back," one of them shouted. "Don't tell me she wants to play again." The girl's cheeks burned, but the mechanic bent down and whispered, "Ignore them. Focus only on me. Nothing else matters." With trembling hands, she strapped the brace onto her leg. The soft hum of energy filled the air as the device activated. The children's mocking voices grew quieter, curiosity replacing cruelty as they noticed the glowing frame hugging her leg. The mechanic stepped back, folding his arms. "Stand!" The girl inhaled deeply and pressed her foot to the ground. The brace responded smoothly, holding her weight. She rose slowly, her body shaking with fear, but she did not fall. A small gasp escaped her lips. One step, then another. The field went silent. Even the ball stopped rolling as the children watched. The girl's eyes filled with tears as she took another step, then another. The brace held firm. She looked up at the mechanic, who gave her a small nod. Her heart raced, her chest burning with joy. I can walk," she whispered. "Not just walk," the mechanic said firmly. "Run," her breath caught. Could she? She hesitated, then gathered her courage. She pushed forward, her feet carrying her faster, the brace glowing brighter with each step. She was running. Running for the first time in her life. The children gasped. Some cheered. Others stared in disbelief. And then, a sudden crackle of energy shot through the brace. Sparks burst from the core, and the device jerked violently. The girl stumbled, her foot catching on the ground. She fell hard into the dirt, the sound of laughter exploding once again around her. "See? Broken again." One boy shouted. Her cheeks burned with shame, and tears blurred her vision. She wanted to disappear, to sink into the earth. The pain in her leg returned, sharp and cruel. For a moment, she believed it was all hopeless, but then she felt a strong hand lifting her from the ground. The mechanic crouched beside her, his jaw tight. His voice was low but steady. "Look at me." She raised her tear-filled eyes. "You ran," he said firmly. "Even if it was for seconds, you ran. Don't let their laughter take that away from you." Her lips trembled. But it broke again. "Machines break," he said, holding up the sparking brace. "That's what they do. And I fixed them. What matters is that your legs remembered something new today. They remembered how to run." The children's laughter still echoed, but now some of them looked uncertain, even uneasy. They had seen her run. That fact could not be erased. The girl wiped her tears, her chest swelling with stubborn pride. She nodded weakly. "Then fix it again." The mechanic's lips curled into the faintest smile. "I will, stronger than before. I promise." He lifted her in his arms, carrying her back toward the workshop. The ball rolled forgotten across the playground as the other children watched in silence. For the first time, some of them did not laugh. They only stared, their curiosity greater than their cruelty. As they walked away, the girl clung to the mechanic's shirt. Deep inside, hope flickered brighter than ever before. She had run. Even if only for a few seconds, she had tasted freedom. The brace was broken again, yes. But so was the wall that had held her back for years. And the mechanic, with fire in his eyes, knew he would not stop until she could run without falling, until she could play ball without fear. Asterisk. The workshop was dark except for the faint glow of the broken brace lying on the table. Sparks still clung to its joints, the metal scorched from the failed test. The little alien girl sat silently in a chair nearby, her eyes lowered, shame heavy on her shoulders. The mechanic stood over the device, his jaw tight. His hands traced the cracks in the alloy, the burnt wires, the unstable energy core. He knew why it had failed. The brace needed more than scraps and patched circuits. It needed a crystal and energy heart strong enough to stabilize every step. But such crystals were rare, expensive, guarded. The girl broke the silence with a whisper. "It's hopeless, isn't it?" He turned to her sharply. "Hopeless? You ran. For the first time in your life, you ran. Don't ever call that hopeless." Her eyes widened at the fire in his voice. She nodded quietly, though doubt still clung to her heart. The mechanic glanced back at the brace. He knew what had to be done. To finish this, he needed to go where most would not dare. The restricted scrapyard on the far side of the colony, the place filled with broken alien war machines, guarded by patrols who allowed no one inside. That was where the crystals could be found. That night, when the colony fell asleep, the mechanic prepared. He packed only what he needed: a bag, his tools, and a small lantern. His hands shook as he tightened the straps. He was no soldier, no fighter, just a man who fixed what others had thrown away. But tonight, he would risk everything for the girl's chance to be free. The scrapyard lay beyond the edge of the colony, where shadows swallowed the ground. Fences of rusted steel rose high, glowing with warning lights. Inside, piles of alien machines lay like graves, their twisted bodies reminders of old battles. Somewhere within those heaps, the crystals pulsed faintly, waiting to be taken. He crouched low, moving along the fence until he found a gap. His heart raced as he slipped inside. The air smelled of burned metal and dust. Every step crunched beneath his boots, loud in the silence. A beam of light swept across the yard patrol guards. The mechanic pressed himself against a wrecked hull, holding his breath as voices passed close. "Another thief last week," one voice muttered. "Nearly lost a hand for it." The mechanic gritted his teeth. He couldn't be caught. Not tonight. When the guards moved on, he slipped deeper into the yard. His eyes scanned the heaps of machines, searching for the faint glow he remembered from old repairs. Minutes dragged like hours. His lungs burned with tension. And then, finally, he saw it, buried inside the chest of a broken alien walker. A shard of crystal pulsed with steady light. It was small, cracked on the edges, but strong enough for his brace. He climbed the wreck, prying the armor open with his wrench. Metal screeched, echoing through the scrapyard. His heart pounded as he pulled harder, every sound risking discovery. At last, the chest split open, and the crystal gleamed like fire in the dark. He reached for its sharp edges, cutting into his palm as he pulled it free. Blood ran down his wrist, but he held it tightly, unwilling to let go. "Hey! Who's there?" A guard shouted. The mechanic froze. Lights swept toward him. Shouts rose, boots thundering closer. Clutching the crystal, he leapt down from the wreck and ran. His lungs burned, his injured hand dripping blood, but he didn't stop. He darted between machines, their towering shadows hiding him for moments at a time. A spotlight grazed his shoulder. "Stop, thief!" He pushed harder, slipping through a narrow gap between two hulks of metal. The guards cursed behind him, their voices fading as he scrambled through the hole in the fence and tumbled onto the dirt outside. For a long moment, he lay on the ground, chest heaving, sweat soaking his shirt. His hand throbbed with pain, blood staining the crystal he still held tightly. But his lips curved into a tired smile. He had it. By the time he returned to the workshop, dawn was breaking. His body trembled with exhaustion, but he did not rest. He placed the crystal into the brace's core, watching as it pulsed with new light. The device hummed softly, alive in a way it had never been before. The girl stirred awake in her chair, eyes widening at the sight of him. "You're hurt," she gasped, seeing the blood on his hand. The mechanic shook his head. "Doesn't matter. What matters is this." He pointed at the glowing brace. "It's ready now." Tears filled her eyes as she looked at him. "Why would you do all this for me?" He paused, then answered simply, "Because no one should be told they can't play." The girl pressed her lips together, unable to speak. She had never known sacrifice like this, never known anyone who would risk so much for her dream. The mechanic sat heavily in his chair, cradling his injured hand. He was weary, but in his heart, a fire burned brighter than ever. The crystal was his sacrifice. The risk was his price. And soon, the girl would run again, this time without falling. The workshop smelled of oil, metal, and faint traces of blood. The crystal he had stolen from the scrapyard sat glowing in the brace, pulsing like a living heart. Its light painted the walls in soft blue shadows. The mechanic leaned forward, his injured hand wrapped in cloth, sweat dripping down his forehead. Every movement hurt, but his eyes never left the device. For hours, he worked without pause. Sparks hissed as he welded the final joints. Circuits hummed as he rewired connections with the precision of a surgeon. His hands shook from fatigue, but his will was unbroken. Each screw tightened was more than metal, it was a promise. A promise that the little alien girl would never hear the words "you can't" again. The girl sat nearby, wide-eyed, watching every moment. She had never seen such determination. His fingers bled, his body trembled, yet he never stopped. She wanted to speak, to tell him to rest, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she just sat silently, her chest tight with emotion she didn't fully understand. At last, the mechanic placed the brace on the table and stepped back. The crystal at its core pulsed steadily, no longer unstable but perfectly synchronized with the frame. The device gleamed like something reborn, no longer scraps held by hope, but a creation of strength and grace. "It's ready," he whispered. The girl's heart pounded. She stood slowly, her hands trembling as she reached for it. "Are you sure this time?" His gaze was steady. "Machines may break, but this one was built with something stronger," she frowned. "What's that?" He gave a faint smile. "Faith," she blinked, unsure what he meant but nodded. With careful movements, he strapped the brace to her leg. The metal clicked into place, the crystal glowing brighter as it synchronized with her body. A gentle hum filled the air, not violent like before, but steady, calm, almost protective. The mechanic stepped back. "Stand," her heart raced. She pushed her foot down. The brace responded instantly, supporting her weight with smooth precision. She stood tall, taller than she had ever stood before. Her lips parted in shock. It feels different." "Then walk," he said. She took one step. The brace flowed with her, not resisting, not failing. She took another step, then another. Her movements were fluid, natural, as if the brace was not a machine at all but part of her. Her chest tightened with emotion. Tears blurred her vision, but she did not stop. She walked across the workshop, turned, and walked back again. Each step echoed like thunder in her heart. "Now run," the mechanic said softly. She froze. The words struck her like lightning. To run was a dream, one she had whispered to the stars countless nights. She swallowed hard. "What if I fall again?" The mechanic's voice was firm. "Then you get up again. But you won't fall." "Not this time." She inhaled deeply. Her legs trembled, not from weakness, but from fear of believing too much. Then she pushed forward. One step became two, two became three, and suddenly she was moving faster. Faster than she ever had in her life. Her laughter rang out, raw and bright, as she ran across the workshop. The wind kissed her cheeks, her heart soared. For the first time she was free. She turned, sprinted back, and then, without hesitation, she kicked a ball that had rolled into the corner. The ball flew high, bouncing against the wall and rolling back. She gasped. I kicked it. I really kicked it." The mechanic's lips curled into a small smile. His chest felt heavy, but it wasn't pain, it was pride. "Told you," he said quietly. The girl collapsed into laughter, tears streaming down her face. She fell to her knees, not from weakness, but from joy too big to contain. She looked at him, her voice trembling. "You did it. You gave me this." He shook his head. "No, you did it. You stood. You walked. You ran. I only gave you the chance." She touched the brace, feeling the soft hum against her skin. It was no longer just metal. It was part of her, a gift born from sacrifice. Outside, the children's voices floated across the field. They were already playing, their laughter rising. The girl wiped her tears, her eyes shining. Can I try outside?" The mechanic hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, it's time." The girl's breath quickened, not from fear this time, but from excitement. She stepped toward the door, her movements smooth, powerful. For the first time, she was not hiding on the edges of the playground. For the first time, she was ready to step into the game. The mechanic followed behind her, his tired body aching but his heart stronger than ever. He had given everything, his blood, his strength, his nights of rest, and now, as the sun rose over the colony, he knew it had been worth it. Because today, the little alien girl would no longer sit in the shadows. Today, she would show the world what faith and sacrifice could build. The playground was alive with noise. The children shouted, their ball flying high into the air as dust lifted with every step. They were too caught up in their game to notice at first that someone new had walked onto the field. The little alien girl stood at the edge, her brace glowing softly with the light of the crystal. Her heart raced. For years she had watched from the shadows, too afraid to join, but today she stood tall. Today she was no longer broken. The mechanic remained behind her, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. His tired eyes followed her carefully, ready to step in if anything went wrong. But he didn't move closer. This was her moment, not his. The children slowed their game when they noticed her. Laughter rippled through the group, sharp and cruel. "She's back again?" One boy sneered. "Didn't she fall last time?" Another said. The girl's cheeks burned, but she didn't lower her gaze. She clenched her fists, forcing her voice to stay steady. "This time is different," the mechanic's deep voice carried across the field, calm and certain. "Play." The children laughed louder, but one of them kicked the ball toward her mockingly. "Fine, let's see you fall again." The ball bounced across the dirt, rolling closer. The girl froze for a moment, fear threatening to drag her back to the ground she had known all her life. But then she remembered the mechanic's words, "Machines may break." "You don't." Her eyes hardened. She ran forward. The brace responded like it was alive, glowing with each step, supporting her with perfect balance. The children's laughter cut off mid-breath as she sprinted across the field, faster and stronger than they had ever seen. Her foot struck the ball with a sharp kick, sending it soaring high into the air. The playground went silent. The ball landed on the far side, bouncing past the stunned players. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then slowly, gasps filled the field. She kicked it. One whispered, "She's running." Another shouted. The girl laughed, pure and unrestrained. For the first time, she was not an outsider. She was in the game. She chased the ball again, dribbling clumsily at first, then faster as her confidence grew. The children tried to keep up, but they struggled to catch her speed. On the sidelines, the mechanic's lips curved into the faintest smile. He had seen engines roar to life, ships rise from death, but nothing compared to watching her fly across the field. One of the boys finally shouted, "Pass it here." The girl hesitated, unsure if it was another cruel trick. But this time, the boy wasn't mocking. His eyes were full of respect. With a grin, she kicked the ball toward him. The game began again, and for the first time in her life, she was part of it. Minutes passed. Sweat covered her forehead, her chest burned with effort, but she didn't stop. Every laugh now was not at her, but with her. She had become a player, not a spectator. At last, the ball rolled out of play, and the children gathered around her, their faces bright with excitement. "You can really run," one girl exclaimed. "That thing on your leg, it's amazing," said another. The little alien girl's eyes shone with tears, but this time they were not tears of sadness. She turned, searching for the mechanic. He stood quietly at the edge, watching. She ran to him, her steps light and strong. "You did it," she cried, her voice breaking. "You made me like them." No better than them. The mechanic crouched slightly, meeting her gaze. His voice was steady, carrying the weight of truth. No, I didn't make you like them. You always had it inside you. All I did was give you the chance to show it. Her lips trembled. But why? Why would you do all this for me? He looked at her for a long moment, then placed his rough, scarred hand on her shoulder. Because once, I was told the same words. You can't, and I swore that if I ever had the chance, I'd make sure no one else would have to hear them again. The girl's eyes filled with wonder. For the first time, she understood. This wasn't just about fixing a broken leg. It was about breaking a chain of pain, about proving that no voice of cruelty could decide someone's future. She hugged him tightly, her small arms around his neck. He didn't move at first, but then he placed a gentle hand on her back. The children called from the field, their voices no longer mocking but eager. Come on, we need you on our team. The girl pulled back, her face glowing with joy. She looked at the mechanic, uncertain. Go, he said simply, and she did. She ran back onto the field, her laughter echoing across the sky. For the first time in her life, she wasn't the outsider. She wasn't the girl who couldn't play ball. She was part of the game, part of the joy, part of the dream. The mechanic watched from the sidelines, his chest heavy but his heart full. He had sacrificed his sleep, his safety, even his blood, but it had been worth it, because his plan had never been about machines. It had never been about metal or crystals. His plan had always been simple, to give her back the dream she had been denied. And as the ball flew across the field, her voice shouting with laughter among the others, he knew the plan was complete.